everyone. Welcome to our session today with Dr. Ann Gillard. Dr. Ann has worked as an evaluator and researcher in camps for children with serious illnesses and disabilities for more than 15 years. She currently is working as a research evaluation advisor for Serious Fun Children's Network and the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp. Her work focuses on building camps' capacities for evaluation through education and professional development. Dr. Gillard's research areas include youth development, out-of-school time programs such as camps, children and youth with serious illness, and social justice. I'm sure you will enjoy her, and with that, I'm happy to welcome Dr. Ann Gillard.
Hi, thank you so much, Patty. Thanks for the great introduction, and nice to see everyone. I got the wonderful opportunity to come to the COCA International Conference back when it was in Fargo in North Dakota a couple years ago. So I'm not sure if anyone, if I got to meet any of you there, but if so, it's nice to see you, and welcome to the new folks here who are here today. So this is a session about logic models, and I love them. I love them so much, and and hopefully by the end of this session, you are also going to at least like them a little bit. I love them because it helps us really share what our intentions are about young people and the programs that we run for them and the camps that we run. And it really helps us keep that focus on the participants. We know that there's a lot of effort that goes into running camps, but sometimes we might forget about what's the actual change that we might see in the participants? What do we hope will happen or improve in their lives? And that's why I love logic models. So today we're going to be talking about why we use logic models. We'll talk about what goes into a logic model, all the components. We'll actually design a logic model. And then we'll also describe how to evaluate virtual programs, because that is related to logic models a little bit in these times. So before we begin, I want to find out a little bit about you. Knuckles, are you able to pull up the poll at this time? So please go ahead and answer this question. Looking like a numbers are running, coming in fast and furious. All right, so it looks like a little bit of a mix of folks here between people who have used a logic model and people who have not yet, and some people who aren't sure. So hopefully we'll be able to clarify that for everyone, and for those who have done a logic model before, hopefully you'll learn some new tips and tricks and some ways of thinking about it. So thanks for that, Knuckles. I appreciate it. All right. Let's see. Okay. So we're going to start with an activity. And so hopefully you were able to grab a piece of paper or just open up a blank document on your computer. And what I'd like for you to do is to put in 5 columns, left to right. So I'm going to share my screen and show you what I mean. So oops, here we go. There we go. So in the screen here, you see 5 red rectangles. Please go ahead and sort of create that in your own document. Don't worry, you're not going to have to share it out. So if it's not exactly in this way, that's absolutely fine. So hopefully you can get a chance to get ready, and we're going to start an activity called My Rich Aunt. So the story about My Rich Aunt is that is a metaphor, right? So basically, here's the story. You recently discovered that you have a rich and eccentric aunt who lives very far away, and she wants to give you $30,000 to buy a car. So in your head, please think about what your aunt's name is and where she lives, and just sort of think about what that looks like. But to get the money, you will need to prove to her why you need a car. So for this first question, please go ahead and on your piece of paper or on your on your screen, go ahead and write down three compelling reasons why you need the car and the difference it will make in your life. And please write the answers to this on the far right rectangle of the 5 rectangles. So the one that's furthest on the right. So go ahead and write that down. And just take a minute to do that, please. What are those 3 reasons that you need that car? Okay. And in your and I'm just curious, what were some of the things that people put down in their that they use the reasons for the car? Like what were some of those compelling reasons? And please go ahead and write that in the chat box. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can easily see what that looks like. Okay, so safe transportation. Great. What else? Get supplies. Need a reliable vehicle. More reliability. Lots of reliability. Oh, getting out of the city. To get to camp. Great, and all the joys that camp brings. Get to work. More work. You need a bigger car for your family. Yeah, these are all very compelling reasons why you would want a car. Awesome. Thank you. Perfect. Love it. All right, so we're going to keep on going and go on to our next question. So your aunt wants to know that you are a good planner. And of course, working in the camp world, you of course are a good planner, but she needs to know that. So what sorts of things will you need to have organized and in place before you get your car? And to answer this question, please put your answers in the farthest left. So the very first column or the first rectangle that you have. What are the things that you need to do before you get your car? Please go ahead and take a little bit to fill that in, please. All right, so hopefully you got a chance to write some things in. What are some of the things that folks wrote for what you need to do before you get your car? What are some of those things? And please go ahead and write those in the chat box. Oh, insurance, yeah. Lots of insurance, a license, yeah, getting some of the paperwork in order. Ooh, a test drive. Yeah, figuring out which kind of car you want, like the shopping. You need some safe parking, loan rates. Yeah, these are all great things. Although you actually don't need a loan because your aunt is paying for this car. So just to be clear, yeah, like how are you going to get gas money and keep it up for sure? Yeah, how are you going to keep the maintenance and the gas? Yeah, awesome. So you're going to need a plan for all of these things. Perfect. So we'll go on to the next one. And so please enter this one into the second column from the left. So your aunt wants to get an idea about how are you going to use this car on a regular basis? What are going to be your main uses for this car? So please go ahead and spend a few seconds thinking about what you're actually going to use your car to do. And please go ahead and write that on your own papers. Okay, and hopefully you got a chance to get a couple of ideas down. Brittany, this goes into your second box from the left. So what were some of the things that people wrote down for your main uses of the car? Please go ahead and write those in the chat box. Okay, work, doctor's appointments, school, travel, work, errands, family, recreation, awesome. Yeah, kids activities, driving them around, community service, more work, getting around so you can get that gas money. Awesome. Great. All right, so we are going to move on to the next one here. So this goes into the third column in your boxes, the third one from the left. So the thing about your aunt is that she is pretty picky and she also lives far away, and she's going to want to make sure that you actually are spending the money on a car and that you're actually using that car. So every 6 months, she wants you to send her some sort of concrete proof that you've been using it, some sort of evidence to show that you've been using it. What sort of evidence could you send to your aunt about every 6 months or so? And so again, please write this in the third column from the left. All right. So, what are some of the things that people wrote down for this one? What's some of the ideas for evidence you can send? So, gas receipts, awesome. The odometer reading, yeah, you could take a little picture and send it along. Photo of the mileage, oil change receipts, maintenance receipts, the Easy Pass bill, yeah, exactly. Great, yeah, maintenance and oil change receipts, like photo. I love that. Photos of where you've been. You can drive it to go visit her. That would be some good evidence as well. You know, have her actually interact with the car. Great, really creative. I really appreciate this. So we'll move on to the last one, and then this goes into your remaining empty box. So after 3 years, you've been using the car and you're happy with it. And it was a new car, so you don't have any problems with it, no breakdown problems. You suddenly hear from your aunt that she's coming for a visit. Hooray. And she is going to want you to show her what changes that car has made to your life. So what can you show her, and what maybe do you need to do to start planning for it now? So please answer this last question in your remaining empty box. In the 3 years, what changes has this car made in your life? And please go ahead and spend a few seconds writing that down. Okay, what are some of the things that people are starting to write down? What sort of changes do you anticipate this car making in your life? And please go ahead and write those things in the chat box. Oh, freedom of travel. I love it, Shock. That's great. Yeah, less time commuting. You don't have to take the bus, and you have more free time. Yeah, you save money. You don't, so maybe you can spend that money on other things. You have a new job. You can look at the performance review from your job, all the money saved, not worrying about car payments. Yeah, these are all important things that would improve your quality of life, right? Like these are things that sort of make it easier for you to do things like the community service and taking family around. Yeah, you're on time for things, so maybe that also helps you keep your job. There's all sorts of things. Not worrying about car payments. Yeah, this is all good stuff. What else can you use that money for? Maybe you can invest in some things and become more financially stable. There's lots of things that can come from those changes. So good job on doing this. And by the way, the picture that I've been using is not, unfortunately, my actual aunt. This is Madam C.J. Walker, who was the first Black millionaire in the United States. She lived in Indiana, and she made her millions selling hair care products. I wish she was my aunt. I'm sure she would have loved to have bought me a car, but that's who the picture is. So just wanted to point that out. Congratulations, everyone. You just made a logic model. What? Amazing. It is true. You just made one, and I'm going to show you about exactly how you did this, and how these car ideas translate into program logic models that you can apply to your camp. So this is a sort of a traditional sort of logic model that you're seeing right now. And I'll sort of break down what the different parts were. So when you answered the question about what are the reasons that you need a car, that can go into the long-term outcomes. That's why you put it on the far right, because those are some of the sort of longer term or more down the road sorts of ideas, no pun intended, ideas that can go along with having a car. But it might also fit into your situation. Why do you need a car? So what's the real purpose of having a car for you? So maybe that's a way to explain, why does this program exist, or why do you need that car? When you answer the questions about what you need for planning, so that second question, that goes into input. So those are some of the ideas about doing the shopping for cars, getting a license, getting insurance. All those things are inputs or resources that you need. And that's why it's on the left, because it's one of those foundational things. Like, you can't run your program, you can't drive your car unless you have those basic things. The third question that you answered was about, what are you going to use the car for? What were the main uses of the car? And that has to do with activities. So, for some of those, you were talking about driving to work or driving to community service, or driving your family around. Those are all activities that you would put into the outputs here. And that's an example of what outputs can look like. And then the fourth question that you answered was about, the evidence that you would send to your aunt every 6 months to show that you're using the car. And again, that's sort of outputs. That's how much did you use it? What were the gas receipts? How much are you spending on gas? Are you actually using it in the way that she thought you would? So that's that evidence that you would share every 6 months. And for those of you who have applied for grants or funding, sometimes you notice that funders require you to send in a report every 6 months about what you're doing with the funds. Well, this is the exact same idea. And then finally, the last question that you answered was about, showing evidence to your aunt about what the difference that this car has made in your life. And so here we have the short-term and possibly medium-term outcomes of having a car. And so that might be just things in the short term, like, you're able to get to work. Maybe you have a better quality of life because you're spending less money on gas, and so you can spend it on other things to support yourself. So that's where that is the logic model. So you did just create a logic model. Congratulations. For those of you who have ever done this before, now you can say that you've developed at least one logic model. Just a couple other things to point out about this form. So moving away from the car metaphor for a minute, other things that tend to go into logic models are like a description about the program, like the program name and maybe the mission. You might also include some assumptions that apply to your program, like these tend to be like, assuming good internet connectivity or technological resources if we're doing something online. External factors might be, hopefully when we get back to being together in person, what the weather is like. External factors for camps for kids with cancer also include, just like not feeling well or having health challenges that get in the way of doing that. So some logic models also talk about these things at the bottom that sort of underlie the whole logic of what you're doing. We're not going to talk too much about those today, but I did just want to point those out as something that when you work on your own logic models, hopefully after the session, you'll be able to include those, because they really are the important factors that affect what your program does. So what are program logic models used for? Well, there's a few things. They tend to be a roadmap or a blueprint. They tend to be just one page, sometimes a little bit longer. It's basically an explanation of if-then relationships. It shows what the intentions are of your program. So, why, like, what are you trying to get out of it, and how are you trying to get there? It's something that is often requested by potential funders or people who are stakeholders in your camp. So these might be things that they want to see, like, well, tell me a little bit about your camp. They don't need to know all the details, but they want to see, like, what are you aspiring to? What are your aspirations for this? And then it's also used for evaluation. So as Patty mentioned, I've been doing research and evaluation in camps for kids with serious illnesses for like over 15 years now. And evaluation, you need to know what to evaluate. And by having a logic model, it makes it very easy to think about, to break down the different components of your program and think about how you're going to evaluate those. So we'll talk about that a little bit. There's going to be some time to chat about that at the end. So I just wanted to mention that as well. So here, this is sort of how we what you see on the screen right now is about outcomes. So it's this idea that you kind of work backwards. So you kind of start with typically your short-term or maybe medium-term outcomes, and then you work both backwards and forwards. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. But these are the different types of outcomes. So when I talk about short-term outcomes, I'm talking about changes in learning. Like, what did people immediately get out of your camp program? So these might be, changes in their awareness about some topic, or their knowledge about a topic, or maybe attitudes toward having cancer or having an illness. It might be skills like teamwork skills or friendship skills. It might be different opinions, so changing their minds about how they view things. They might have different aspirations. I know for a lot of the kids that I've worked with at Hole in the Wall, being around all these doctors and nurses and these healthcare professionals all the time have sort of changed the way that they think about their career aspirations. So that might be something that you think about. It might be changes in motivation for medication adherence or things like that, or behavioral intent, which is kind of the same thing. And then if you have those short-term outcomes, then you have some medium-term outcomes. And this is where you see some changes in action. So you might see changes in behaviors, reaching out to make new friends, following up with people after camp who you got to be friends with. You might have different changes in decision-making or decisions that you make. Maybe there's different policies. Maybe there's a different social action that happens. And then if you have those long-term outcomes, then you have if you have those medium-term outcomes, then you have long-term outcomes. So these are actual changes in conditions. Conditions for the participants is where we'll kind of focus today. So a lot of times, we talk about improved quality of life or resilience or things like that are that are important for kids, but we don't necessarily see them like right after a camp program. It's something that we think will happen later on down the line. Okay. Just a couple more things just to kind of focus on like what is a logic model, and then we'll take a break to see what sort of questions and ideas that people have. So here, I mentioned about sort of working both backwards and forwards. So here at the bottom, we're thinking about how. So how refers to the resources, the activities, and the outputs that are associated with your programs. But then a logic model also helps to answer why. What's the so what here? So what are those benefits to the clients or the campers or the communities or the what like so what? If you do this program, so what does it matter in the lives of the people who participate? So it's that overall aim or intended impact of how things go. And again, getting back to that, so when we talk about a logic model, this is the logic, right? Like logic is if this happens, then that happens. And so here, you can see the connections between these four areas. If you have these resources to run that are needed to run your program, then you can do the activities. And if you have access to those resources, then you can do those activities. And if you do those activities, then you'll have delivered the services that you planned. And if you deliver those services, then there's going to be some benefits for the people who you serve. So that's that idea of, if we do this, then that happens. And it's really just clarifying that for lots of different groups. So it could be for your funders to help them understand what your program does and say, hey, yeah, we really want those. We also want those benefits for our campers or for our camper families. And we also want to make sure that like this, and we want to understand like how do you get to that point. But it also helps us understand from a programming standpoint, like what are we really trying to do? What's our intentions here? We know that through research that I've done and lots of other people have done that if you intend to achieve a certain outcome for campers, then, and you say that you're going to do that and you do things to make that happen, that's actually going to happen, or happen at a higher level than if you didn't do anything at all. So there's lots of good reasons to be very intentional about your programs. All right. Well, before we go on, I just wanted to sort of stop there. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see what sort of questions that people have at this point before we move on to our little breakout groups. And if you have a question, you can either jump on the mic or you can drop it in the chat box, whatever works for you. All right. Looks like no questions at this point, but I will. We will open to questions at any point. So the next thing we're going to do is break up into. Let's see. How many people do we have here? Not quite clear, but probably around 25. So I'm thinking that groups of around 4 or 5 is what we'll break up to. So Knuckles, I'm giving you a heads up on the breakout.
We have about 30. We have 36, including yourself and me.
Okay. Oh, great.
34.
Yeah. So I still think groups of 4 or 5 would be perfect to break up into in a second. And I'm going to, in the chat box, I'm going to drop the instructions so that you can go back and review that. And I'll also talk about that for a second. So let me just put this in the chat box real quick, what the directions are. I got it there. So what we're going to do in your small groups is create a logic model for an online camper reunion for 10 to 12-year-old campers. And I've tried to make it as general as possible. I don't have a particular view about what this online camper reunion looks like, but I do think that online camper reunions are something that a lot of camps are thinking about doing these days, given the reality of living with COVID. So hopefully this is a relevant activity for you. So that's just the example of a program that we're going to do. So some people might want to know, like, well, are we talking about like the overall camp program logic model? No, we're not talking about the overall organizational one. We're talking about just the program that you would run for 10 to 12-year-old campers to have a camper reunion that's held online. And so what I want you to do in your small groups is to fill in your logic model. And the way that you do that is you start with the outcomes first. So I'd like for you to decide in your group about 2 to 3, or so short-term outcomes. And really get that set first, because when you're making a logic model, you really focus on the outcomes for participants first. And if you finish that area, then think about what are 3 to 5 activities that you could do to achieve those outcomes. There are, hold on. I'm going to give you another resource here. And I'm going to send you out a blank. This was from the first page. But if you go to this link, you'll see some of the materials for this for today's session. So one, it's the presentation itself, and then there's also a blank logic model, and that's the document that we're going to be working on. So I just dropped the link to that in the chat box, and you can go and get that. And let's see, what else can I tell you about this? When you fill out the 2 to 3 short-term outcomes, and then the 3 to 5 activities that would lead to those outcomes, and really focus on that. You might not have enough time to do all that. I think we're going to give you about 10 to 12 minutes to work on this. And if you get those 2 areas done, then go ahead and fill out other parts of the logic model, like the inputs, the participation, like, who how many people will be planning to come to this, etc. What are the long-term outcomes? Like, go ahead and fill out any other parts of it that your group wants to. So we'll spend about 10 minutes doing this. So for me, that means that we'll be meeting back at 12:40. or 9:40 or 10:40 or 11:40, depending on where in the country you are. So we'll give it about 10 minutes to do that. And before we break up into the groups, are there any questions? Okay. All right. Great. So Knuckles, if you would mind breaking up everyone into the groups, and we'll meet back at 12:40.
Dr. Gellert, would you like to go to a room or stay out here?
Yeah. Is it possible to like float between rooms in any way?
Um, Sometimes it is. You may have to come back out here to the first room, and then I could send you into a different room.
Okay. But
All
yeah,
right.
if you want to send me to another room right now, I can come back. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I was in a room with just one other person and they weren't actually there.
Oh. Do you remember what room you were in? You were with Jay, and Jay wasn't there?
Yeah.
Oh, he's here now. Let me move you guys into a different group, just because a lot of people left. Here, Aaron. There you go. It should be on the bottom where it says breakout rooms. You'll push on that button, and it'll take you to the new room.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem. No worries, Jay.
I just came back. Knuckles, I don't know if you're able to send me to another group.
I sure will.
Okay, thank you.
Give me 1 second. On the bottom in breakout rooms, if you, oh, I think she got it. Let's move Jay to room 6.
Okay. All
Another
right.
room.
Well, yeah, another room, please. That group was doing great.
You've been to 2 and 3 already.
Yep.
Here you go.
Try one. group one was working hard, so I didn't want to disturb them too much.
No problem. We'll send you over to another group. There you go.
Okay. Well, group five was going well.
Oh,
Is there another group?
we have two more groups. I'll send you over to group 6.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it looks like we're getting up on time. So maybe we can send out the like start to close the rooms. I think it gives them like a 1 minute warning of being like that the breakout rooms will close in a minute.
Yes, it does. I will go ahead and do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, looks like folks are coming back, and certainly 10 minutes is not enough time to create a logic model. So thank you for your strong efforts and work in aiming to do that. It looks like a lot of groups did get actually pretty far in doing this. I'm curious to see from the group what sort of questions arose as you were doing this. What thoughts or reflections or questions came up for you as you were thinking through this?
I think one of the first things when we started to do activities, we quickly realized we had to go back to the outcomes and make sure that the activities reflected what our goals were.
Yeah, really easy to get caught up in like, how do I design this really cool, awesome activity, and then kind of forget about the overall purpose of it. I also struggle with that as well. What else? What else came up for folks or questions that arose? Other things that you noticed for this process?
So it was really interesting. We actually got all the way through it, and when we got to long-term outcomes, we said that our overall goal would be kids taking connection skills out into the real world and past camp. And we were like, oh, yeah, that's really cool to think about. The why is really that. Like, it's not just about connecting with people at camp. It's about how can we generalize this to like a kid's entire life. So that was really cool.
Yeah, my God. Thanks, Brooke. I mean, that's so powerful, right? Like to really think about, the kids who we serve taking that out into the world and the connections that they can make when they might feel shy or nervous about doing it, but taking that confidence. Awesome. Thank you for that. What other things came up for folks?
Our group, looking at the table and the medium for the action changes in behavior and decision making, we talked about how it's not necessarily the kids that are zoomed out, burnout or anything. They want to still stay connected. It's their only way to stay connected with their friends. But it's really the parents that are a bit more Zoom burnout, and more so it's a nice day. You're not going to be around kids, but you can go outside and play. And so it's how do we change the behavior, not behavior, but the decision making and the buy-in from the parents to appropriately keep virtual programming continued to stay connected throughout the year. So I thought that was really interesting. We didn't necessarily do the example. We used the real life examples that we're currently working with.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's I think what you're sharing, Tara, is the idea that we also have to look at the inputs and the activities as well to think about who are these for, because it sounds like you're recognizing that the situation at the top is that you need parents buy-in as well. Maybe that's an assumption, maybe that's an external factor. There's some ways to think through that to really bring that into the logic of your model of your program. We'll take one more reflection and then we'll move on to the next thing. Anyone else have something to share? Okay. All right. Great. Well, congratulations. Now you've actually made 2 logic models for today, which is an incredible feat, and you should be very proud of yourselves. I wanted to sort of pivot a little bit to how do we integrate evaluation into these ideas around logic models. And so I wanted to share with you something that we have done at the Hole in the Wall Gang Camp when we moved to online programs for last summer. So we called them camp virtual visits, and these were basically camp people, a couple of volunteers, a couple of staff members coming at a family in their home and doing some activities with them. It was very pre-planned, but that's generally what the program was. And so when we talk about how to actually evaluate virtual programs, which I know a lot of you are up to these days, and thinking about, most of the time you send out a survey after the program is done. It can be very difficult to see any sort of change that you might be interested in by doing a pre and a post test. So I, usually, yeah, those, and for the medical professionals here and the, the oncologists who have gone through a lot of training, you're going to say, wait, no, that's terribly wrong. We need pre and post tests and things like that. But in my experience, it's really hard to do that. As program folks, you have a lot going on, and trying to administer a survey to people twice is really hard. So what I kind of like to do instead, especially if it's not a very high stakes thing, is to do like what's sort of a retrospective. So you can ask about things that maybe increased or maybe even decreased, but like how much they increased and things like that. So what you're looking at here on the screen is a part of our logic model. So on the left, you see activities. So these are questions, evaluations of the activities, and these are the first set of questions that people fill out. So, we ask about the activities, and you'll notice in the questions that we ask, we're very specific about, we don't use agree or disagree, because that doesn't tell us a whole lot. But what we do want to know is, what are the percentage of participants who said that the activities were great? Like, that's something that we can use more easily and share with folks. With and then the second question there about, what about meeting my child's interests? So that's something that our program staff are very interested in. Like, they want to make sure that the activities meet the interests of the children. And so that's important as well. And then, they also, our staff also want to say that our activities were engaging, but we want to know, how much did people think that they were engaging? So we're very specific about the questions that we're asking. And then we know if the campers do those activities, then we hope that we're going to be able to see some short-term outcomes. So that's what that arrow is for. And so these are surveys that go out to the parents and caregivers of the campers to report on their experience. And and here I circled under the short-term outcomes. What were those outcomes of the program that were that were seen? So connecting to the camp community, being distracted from worries, feeling less isolated, and then improving family self-worth. So I just wanted to share these with you because these questions worked out really, really well the way that we asked them this summer. We were able to use this information very well. It gave us the exact information that we were looking for. We're happy that our scores were high in these areas. But when when we noticed that a family might have put something on the second or third choice instead of the fourth, we looked into that to see if there was something that we could do to improve. So it was very much, we really did this for program improvement, not necessarily to, report back to funders like how many people were distracted from worries, but that is information that we could share with them if they ask, but they're actually not asking. They just want to make sure that we are asking about it in general. So I'm happy to answer any more questions about that. But I am going to start to close it out for right now. And I'd like for you in the time that we have remaining to think about what questions that you have. But just as takeaways for today, just some of the bottom lines about what this session was about. We use logic models for intentionality and communications and evaluation. We look at inputs, outputs, activities, and outcomes. We typically start with the outcomes first, and we use if-then thinking. And it's also good to use a retrospective approach to evaluate the satisfaction with and the outcomes of virtual programs, if that's something you're looking at. So I'm going to stop sharing now and open it up for questions and comments from folks. Looking over in the chat, it looks like there's a few questions here. So Michelle wants to know how frequently did we send the evaluation form? So, and the rate of return. So the evaluation was sent out within about 2 or 3 days after each session. So it wasn't the same kids every time. It was, they were different participants, although I think there were probably a couple of repeats over the summer. So we weren't bombarding the parents and caregivers with our questionnaires. That's something we're really careful about, knowing that we serve kids with serious illnesses and parents have a lot going on, and we didn't want to burden them anymore. So we sent it out after everyone, and our rate of return was actually really good, about 80% for this summer, and that is much higher than what we get in the summer sessions, which is it's around 50%, which has improved from about 20% not too long ago. So if really in the world of kids living with serious illnesses like cancer and other illnesses, anything over 25% tends to be a pretty good rate of return. So we were thrilled that it was, close to 80, sometimes even 100%, depending on the program. And I think it's because we have better contact information from the families at this point. It's easier for them to fill things out. And we also made sure that these surveys were really short so they could finish it in, typically 3 minutes or less. What other questions do folks have?
Not a question, but just a comment. A lot of people are saying it as well. This was extremely helpful. So I'm at MD Anderson. I'm within a hospital, and we do our own camps and programs within. So I don't deal with partners or like our board, but it's more of the institution. I have to not fight against, but let them know the importance of what we do. And I have a lot of ideas, but I don't formulate the process of or how to communicate it correctly sometimes. Eventually, when I talk long enough, it gets there. But this is really helpful to actually put it into a, like I'm looking at the slides, how do we do it and why, so what? So this is really helpful just to form a thought of really and targeting really what we're looking for and how I can educate the institution to agree to give us what we need. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And that's, that communicating not only for outside groups, but also for ourselves can really help us identify, what is it about this program that makes it this program? What are those key ingredients that go into it that we have to really make sure are there so that we get the outcomes that we want? So that's, thanks for saying that, Tara. Knuckles, yeah. So do we evaluate after time has passed to gauge mid or long term? Yeah, well, this has been such a year for all of us. We don't know yet. So I've been kind of hesitant to look at, medium or longer term impacts of our virtual programs because that, one, it's harder to do that sort of evaluation. You typically need to do more than a survey. You need to include some interviews or focus groups or maybe some other ways to really get in a little bit deeper into those changes in decisions or changes in behaviors that you see. But I'm curious if anyone here has done anything like that in the last year or so in the COVID context, because that's one I'm thinking about doing, but I haven't made any decisions yet. I haven't figured that one out yet. Has anyone else figured that out? Because I'd love to hear that.
We did a small focus group with a mentor community that we use just to kind of get their take on just the difference in experience, how that virtual program can help enhance what we do in person. But yeah, just scratching the surface.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I suspect that focus groups are probably a good way to get that information, because then we don't exactly know, because this is a new world for all of us who are youth serving organizations, that, well, we know that having a connection with camp, or let's say doing a camper reunion in person versus virtually, it's just going to feel different. Like there's no way around that, but we don't know what it's supposed to feel like, or what people did actually experience. So I think methods that sort of get at more qualitative data, where you can ask follow-up questions and things like that, are probably the way to go. And so thanks for saying that, Beth.
We do the same thing, except we've never done an evaluation with our families per se. We do them with the med team. But for me, because I'm in development, I have to use these all of the times for granting applications. So that's where it's problematic for us, because they always want a measurable result. And it's quite difficult to get that for that mid to long-term outcome. So I was just curious if there were anyone had any creative ways of going about that.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Shannon. I think if your funders are looking for medium and long-term outcomes, then they need to pay for you to hire an outside evaluator to do this work, because that's a level of evaluation that, like, you don't need to be worried about. You've got your own things to deal with, and you kind of need to do some more advanced methods, use more advanced methods to get at those potential outcomes that happen over the medium or long term. So I mean, I don't know how able you are to push back on your funders and say, yeah, that'd be great if you want me to show that, like, this changed the life trajectory of somebody, but you got to give me some money for a research project. And maybe they will, and then you can partner with a university or a local evaluator or something to answer those questions. Because really, evaluating beyond short-term outcomes is just really difficult to do for most organizations. So hang in there. Looks like there's a question from Melissa about how many people usually work on a logic model for each activity, and it totally depends on what that program is. I'm at Hole in the Wall. I've done it a lot of different ways over the years. Our hospital outreach programs has around 30 or 35 full-time staff. And in the past, I've done it with all of them and sort of went around to each of their offices. And it was a huge thing. And it ended up maybe being too many cooks in the kitchen sort of thing. So we sort of changed it a little bit and did more of the leadership of that program, and then shared it with people. So then they shared it with their teams, like, for any additional input. And that seemed to work a little bit better. So, I would say it depends on your group, but more than 10 people working on it, I think, is probably too much. Probably a more comfortable number is like 3 to 8. But it just depends on your program. Those aren't hard and fast numbers. Looks like we have time for one last quick question before we head out. All right. Well, my contact information is on the slides and hopefully available through the conference. And you have that link to the documents from today. I included I wasn't sure how many people would be in this session, so I created a little logic model for a camper reunion. So you're welcome to take that and use that or not for your own ideas, just as an example. But you also have a blank one, and then also the slides from today as well. So I just wanted to thank you for being such a great and engaged group, and thanks so much. And good luck with your logic models.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gillard. We really appreciate it.